Kris, it's great to see you. How are you doing?
Mike, I'm great today. How are you?
Yes, never better. Thank you. Well, once again, Kris, it's a great pleasure to see you. Let me just introduce to those who don't know you, Kris, what a luminary we have in consulting to talk to today. So, Kris, you are the managing partner of digital transformation consulting at WNS and a corporate senior vice president there. WNS is a business process management and digital transformation firm. But then prior to that, you headed up Wipro's consulting division. And I know you also headed up the digital transformation division there. You headed up 6,000 consultants. And prior to that, you were a partner at Accenture and also a partner at McKinsey. So you have quite an illustrious career. And I know you've worked with so many different consultants. And I've had the great pleasure and privilege of working with you. And I've seen how gripped consultants are when you run one of your masterclass sessions. So I wanted you to see if we could come up with a potted version of one of those sessions around really what you feel are the top 5 mistakes that consultants make today. What are the things that you still see today that where consultants are screwing up and effectively, either lessening inadvertently the kind of value they could produce or not fully serving the client? So over to you, Kris. What comes up when you think about this?
So I have to limit it just to 5 mistakes. Is that right? Okay.
For now, just 5.
All right. Well, thanks, Mike. The first one that comes to mind, the first mistake that consultants make, frankly, is diving in too soon. Client presents you with an ask. Your inclination is, I'm a consultant, I should know what to do with this, and I get started. And you see a surprising amount of that around, the industry. And, frankly, the danger in jumping in too soon and starting to rush around is taking the client's problem as presented to you precisely the way the client presented it to you. Because if you stop and think about it, that's not a very logical thing to do. If the client could already solve the issue that they had, they would have solved it. So there's something foundational and fundamental about their way they're thinking about trade-offs or the way they're thinking about, blocks that they've run into. There's something about the way they have framed the problem itself that has made it more difficult to solve for them. So if they call you and say, hey, I have this problem, and they lay it out and define it, and if you rush off to go solve it the way they just defined it, the chances are much higher that you're going to run into the same issues they did. And you see this a lot in terms of consulting firms with some very big brands creating layer upon layer upon layer of ever more complexity to their solution as they go, because, frankly, they didn't take the time to think through how could I create a more easily solvable, reframed problem that is more likely to have a simpler and more elegant answer to it.
Right. So what is the... Okay, and can you just tell us a little bit about what is the psychology of a consultant who knows how to think about the problem? What are they doing differently that a consultant who gets trapped in that cycle isn't?
Well, thank you for suggesting. I'm an industrial psychologist as well, and as a consultant, I can wear all sorts of hats with ease. But joking aside, I think the most valuable thing that makes you the thing that makes you the most valuable as a consultant is actually your ability to crack the problem. Frankly, at the heart of everything, your ability to solve what has been something untractable, which means, in my mind, you have to wrap your mind around it, understand, the examples they're giving you and the small detail picture, but also take the time to pull back and just think, and think about the bigger context, or why hasn't this problem been solved before, and has anyone else solved it? and that sort of thing. And I think sometimes thinking is seen as a waste of time, right? Where doing is what counts, and the more doing, the better. But for sure, at the very beginning, thinking about the problem is a lot more valuable than rushing off to do something. Many consultants are uncomfortable with that. But when I was in the world of strategy consulting, we really had to teach our managers, engagement managers, so on, to build into their calendar about 30% of their time just to think about the problem. It was very uncomfortable because if you're surrounded by people that are doing an action and so on, it seems somewhat self-indulgent to go off and think. But at the other end of the spectrum is, the famous Einstein quote about however many minutes he would have to solve it, he'd spend 95% of that thinking about it, structuring it, and 5% solving it. And I found that's about the right ratio.
Right.
To be successful.
Really helpful, Kris. Thank you. So what's next on your list? What else do we mess up?
Well, number 2 is a corollary for number 1. It's the twin, the evil twin, which is mistaking activity for progress. I see a lot of proposals and so on that are long on, here's the framework we use, and here's the steps we take, and here's the process we follow, and essentially finish with, we won't really think about your problem until you start paying us. We won't really think about the solution for you in your circumstance, your context, and so on until you start paying us. And that manifests in, team shows up or the individual shows up and, begin to do interviews and asking for data and so forth. They don't know what problem they're solving yet. They don't know, what's the heart of what will be the right solution. But if they seem busy, then they seem like they're making progress. And that ends up usually giving you lots and lots of useless information that you have to sift through, lots of data that you have to make sense of. It kills your team. It kills your weekend. It makes your family very unhappy with you. And it just creates mayhem. But I still, to this day, see so many consultants that spend so much time mistaking activity for progress. And the reason I call it the corollary of the first mistake is the answer is similar. That I really think through what are the things I really would need to know, and how do I go find those things? And naturally, I'll find other things, while I'm searching for the things I really need to know. Tends to be much more efficient, much more on point, but that takes, more thought than do early on.
Do you think as consultants, Kris, do you think we just get curious about shiny objects along the way, or is it a sort of
No, it's funny you mention that. It's funny you mention that, because as much as I would like to attribute that tendency to the superior curiosity trait in consultants, when you said that, I could think of, I think I met maybe 5 in my career that really were just shiny object. Isn't this cool? And that's very interesting, but quite some distance from anything relevant. So I've met a few of those, but for the most part, it's more about, if I look busy, they'll think I'm making progress, and I'll figure out what it is I needed to know a little bit later. And that's why I think I think that's more the characteristic. And maybe that comes from a good place of wanting to be helpful and so forth. But it's like the doctor ordering all the tests possible in the hospital without really examining you in any depth to get some idea that maybe it's the knee that is the problem, not, not everything else that could be considered.
Okay, that's helpful, Kris. Thank you. My last question about this before we move on is, do you think that the system sometimes of looking for more ways to bill creates that incentive, or do you think actually it's something else going on?
Look, it's possible that mucking about, which takes longer, can be more lucrative. But I find that that's a very short-sighted strategy, because I have rarely met a consultant who will ever yield on the duration of the project. They're just not in their makeup to say, hey, we finished 4 weeks early, let's declare victory and be finished. They'll find some way to fill the last 4 weeks in useless activity. But the clients actually value much more than you might think someone who says, I think we've done enough, and I think we've cracked it, and I think we've done what we said, and it's time to move on. And clients tend to remember that because it's so unusual.
Kris, thank you. So what's number 3 on your list?
Number 3, confusing price with value. And here's what I mean. A lot of people will naturally say, oh, we lost the deal on price. I mean, I'm surrounded by it every day. Not here, but all sorts of different places. Oh, we lost the deal on price. That's a pretty natural salesy sort of inclination to say anyway. And consultants say it all the time. But what the market's telling you, if you lost a deal that they said that somebody else was a better price or so on, it might just be that they were better at it than you, or you had a misguided understanding of the problem to be solved, or you built in complexity that the client didn't see that made your scope more expansive than they expected. And you did that without educating them about why that's important to think more broadly. But at the heart of it, frankly, is a lot of loosey-goosey assumption that client said, I have a need, they want a consultant, therefore there must be some value in this thing that the client wants done, without ever really examining what the nature of that value is. I've seen way too many situations where the client has hired a consultant, the consultant has delivered what consultants deliver, only to discover that the value to the client of all that work that they just paid for is quite small. Well, it tends to be helpful to know that before you start than it is to find that out as a surprise later. I just the other day had to send a team back to the drawing board because I asked them, so what is this worth? They were telling me, oh, we're going to do this on an as a service basis and it's going to be cool. And I'm like, great, what is this worth to the client? Well, we think it's worth about, maybe $300,000 in value. Or they first said, well, we think it'll be priced at $300,000. I said, no. What's it worth to the client? How does the client cash a check off of this? You're going to deliver these training materials. And how does the client monetize the benefit from that? And you could just see that from the blank stare, that thought that maybe that would be a way to think about it hadn't even occurred. It seems silly to mention it, but if you don't understand what the value is going to be to the client, it's impossible to frame the right work, the right scope, and therefore the right price for your services.
Do you find?
And then, of course, you see a few people that are just, read too many, that mistook the brand they were with for their own value.
Do you find that the attributes of value are pretty limited with a client? They're just basically interested just in profitability, revenue, brand equity, those sorts of things. I mean, or does value span a lot of different
No, value spans a number of different dimensions, of course. But paradoxically, I see far too many consultants that don't hold themselves to a standard of delivering financial or economic outcome. I see a lot of, there's a lot of consultants that will, stop talking, they'll stop in a discussion about value by simply talking about intangibles. People will be better trained, and people will be, more digitally aware, and everyone will understand agile and so forth. But they never push themselves to. So what would the client do with that? And the easy way to go at value, frankly, is if the client had what they asked me for, what would they do with it? And how would they deploy it? How would it work? Is this something that is monetizable, or is this something that will demonstrably move the needle in some other way? But I think common across, whether it's financial or non-financial, you really are putting yourself, or should be putting yourself, to a test of how does the client actually extract value from your work? If you don't hold yourself accountable for that, eventually the client will.
Kris, thank you. What's next on your list?
Item 4, mistake number 4, and this I've unfortunately seen a lot, and that is the client's happy. Mistaking client satisfaction as the right measure of success. Now, let me quickly add, before I sound overly cynical, of course you want your client to be happy and pleased with the work and successful as a result of it. But that can easily lead you to, I solved the problem exactly the way the client asked. All I did was just fill in the blanks of what the client wanted the answer to be in the first place. Sort of the proverbial, yes man or yes woman kind of role. And in my experience, whether or not you have the patience and insight to see it, but in my experience, that has a pretty rapidly declining value to the client. They always delivered exactly what I asked, but we have made no progress. Maybe there's a problem there, right? Right. And so yes, you want client satisfaction, of course, but this goes back to, did the client articulate the problem the right way? Did the client, did you take and build upon that? Were you able to, evolve that into an answer and a solution and a new way of working or whatever that was easier, not more difficult for the client? Were you able to give them something they didn't expect from you? They weren't even looking for necessarily, but when they realize it, they think, holy cow, why didn't we think of this? So pushing yourself beyond merely client satisfaction is really what I mean by a mistake. I have met way too many consultants who will go, basically will say, well, that was a bad answer. They'll say, yeah, but the client's happy. It's like, okay. You won't be in business very long, and they're not. Let alone the fact that, frankly, solving other people's problems is a difficult job. And no matter how, you do the right things, about it, it's pervasive. If you're a problem solver as a consultant, you can never really shut off your brain about thinking about, how do I solve this problem? How do I make it easier for the client? How do I do these things for the client? And so forth. So it's something that's sort of a relentless role. So you might as well do, your best at it. If for no other reason, if you hold yourself accountable to a standard that's a bit higher than the client's, I have found the client will be happy all the time. So it's not a trade-off between client satisfaction and your own. I'm expecting even more of myself than what the client was expecting.
Oh, great, Kris. What's the last mistake then that we
The last is misunderstanding what is a relationship. No matter how well you've dressed it all up, they are paying you. And this is a corollary to we lost the deal on price. Well, we lost the deal because they had a relationship. Relationships, in my experience, are very content-based. I don't mean transactional and transitory. I have many clients that became friends, and we are friends still to this day. But the relationship that we built was all about, am I adding value? And are they appreciative of that value? And do we treat each other with respect as a result of that? And are we, have they grown to believe that I am really doing my very best to help them be successful in whatever role they are playing? And that is something that you prove over and over. And don't get me wrong, I have done some bad work in my career that I would judge as that was not a good piece of work. And I had a client once tell me that. So that was not a good piece of work. I've had other clients that I know thought that, but they were too polite to say it. But relationships in the consulting profession are very much built on, did you make a difference? If you're not making a difference, then I don't care if you went to the same school, or if your kids go to the same school, or if you go to the same church, or you play golf. Pretty quickly you get categorized as, nice guy, not very helpful. So you can eke along on a substance-free relationship. You can eke along for a while, but really the relationships that matter are ones where you've brought your very best and made a difference with that client and helped them be successful.
Very helpful, Kris. Thank you so much. That's been just a terrific 5 lessons. So thanks so much, Kris. Great to see you again, and look forward to seeing you in the next episode.
Thanks so much, Mike. Take care.
All the best. Thank you, Kris.